Welcome back to Inside Sources. Today we have a panel discussion on the state of the nation, specifically looking at the political dimension and the economic dimension, and how both of those interrelate. To join me in this conversation, I have two eminent Nigerian public intellectuals and professionals. Joining us virtually, I have Dr. Marcel Mbamalu, who is the publisher and editor-in-chief of Prime Business Africa. And here in the studio, I have Mr. Fahad Garba Aliyu, who is the managing partner of Ignite Capital. So I'm going to start from the studio. Mr. Fahad, welcome to Inside Sources.
Thank you so much for having me, Mr. Kande.
The situation of the country economically clearly is a bit of a challenge for many of our people. And both government and people, we all agree that there is hardship in the land. Now, my opening question to you is, what are the commanding factors that is responsible for where we are? And then we talk about how we can get out of it. So if there are one or two critical reasons why the situation is where it is, can you, educate Nigerians on that?
Okay. Thank you so much for having me. I think, to be fair to this present administration, there is we can't really the economy is really bad. But to be fair to this economy, to this present administration, this is a problem that we should have addressed over successive governments that we've been kicking down the road. But unfortunately, we are at a point now where we have to deal with this. I think since from May 29th, the president making certain announcements without having a proper plan for it has really put us on this, unfortunate situation. And I think from economic point of view, market wants stability. As long as there is no stability, really, there is going to be chaos. So it's very unfortunate, but I think the state of the nation is a bit chaotic, to say the least. And the government talks a lot about reform. But really, I've asked a few people I know, what are actually these reforms that we are embarking on, so that we know where we are going. And I think even the government have not really done a really good job in explaining what are these reforms, right? So a lot of people say that we should be patient, things will get better, but what are we patient about? What are we patient about, right? If it is you can't have a stable economy when, we have unfortunately, the insecurity, which didn't start from this government, but what are we doing to address it, right? And then from a fiscal point of view, monetary point of view, but it seems our approach is more like fire brigade approach. Something comes up, then we try to just patch it. But I think if the government will have a very coherent vision, a clear path and steps with the right people, I think Nigerians will be a bit more understanding as we address these challenges, because we all know the economy handed over on May 29 was not an excellent economy. But unfortunately, Nigerians will always remember, okay, May 29 to date, what was the dollar rate, right? How much are we buying rice? How much are we buying? Perception is one's reality.
Yeah, and there's a stark difference between where we were before May 29 and where we are today.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that opening comments. Let's take it to Dr. Mbamalu. So because of the situation economically, we've had this End Bad government protest, last month, and quite a bit of dissent in the country. Now, you're a journalist, Dr. Mbamalu. How will you describe the way the government has managed the fallout of the economic problems that led to those protests and the fallout of the protest itself? How will you describe all of that?
Okay, thank you, Lalu, for having me. Well, I think where we are today, it didn't come all of a sudden. I think because we failed to plan, we actually plan to fail. I would tell you that hardship and nation's economic status is more or less dependent on the currency level, the integrity of its currency, the strength of its currency. I know that the former administration of President Muhammadu Buhari didn't do much in terms of controlling the exchange rate, but it got worse probably when the new administration came on board, probably because I think a lot of steps, hurried steps we are taking, including the floating of the naira. However good it might sound at that point, when you don't match that with productivity, what you are going to get is skyrocketing inflation. And that's why we are where we are today. So, of course, with that happening and with a little or virtually no controls, in place to contain our foreign exchange situation as a country, and with low productivity, almost non-existent, especially in critical sectors. Of course, it was a given that hardship will come. And hardship, of course, was the bedrock of the end bad governance protest. You will agree with me that, of course, we've been experiencing exchange rate crisis ever since 2023. It was there before 2023, but it's not in this dimension that we're experiencing them now. The Central Bank of Nigeria announced unification of the Naira exchange rates just last month, which is a major step towards addressing the issue. But as I said earlier, if you don't match it with production, you are still going to get crisis in your hand. So now, of course, that protest you could see, end bad governance protest was orchestrated and announced. But like I said to one of my friends when this was about to happen, I asked, how do you want a protest? And you give a notice, a protest that you want to make that level of statement with. And then you give a notice and all of those in a political situation as we have in the country. Of course, you don't expect government and others to fold their hands, and allow it to succeed. And of course, what I expected government to do, although the interventions I saw, I don't know, of course, you cannot say exactly that this is from government, but of course there were counter efforts to counter those protests. But what I expected government to do was to actually listen and negotiate and dialogue and ensure that, because we are in a democratic government, a democratic government, we expect government to dialogue and get those demands. At least some of them met. But I can tell you that weeks after that protest, none of those demands you would say are seen to have been met. Efforts, of course, there is almost zero communication of the efforts being made to meet those demands. And to me, that's where the problem is. I think that, and to be fair to this government, you would not say that this government originated this problem that we have right now, but I can say that inaction or over-politicization of the actions being taken to address the inherited problems actually worsened them. I think that at the moment, we are doing more politics than governance. And I must tell you, that's my opinion. And I must tell you that the actions that we are taking right now are leading us even more and more to crisis. And my advice to government would be to really listen and act more in line with what the people want. That, to me, that would be my opening statement on this. So, end bad governance protest, not successful. Obviously, not well organized. Government did do well in containing it, I would say no. But Nigeria, as you know, how we are as Nigerians, our convictions, our passion for change, to get our government to do the right things, it has a kind of limited lifespan, and that's the problem. So I think that it was not well done, but that was enough to make a listening government become better. Whether that will happen, time will tell.
Okay, thank you, Marcel. Let's bring it back to Fahad. So let's take an attitude of trying to now look at the solutions. What are the options that exist? We have described what the circumstances are. Everybody understands there's a lot of hardship. There are tough decisions that have been taken. You raised the issue of, not properly considered. Going forward now, how do we get out of this? And I want you to pay attention to what ought to be, in your view, the immediate and short-term measures that can bring relief to the people. Fahad.
Okay. So I think empowering the private sector to really create the jobs needed and giving incentives is like, literally, we just ended the end bad governance protests, and already they are talking about increasing VAT, right? So it's like you are trying to add more hardship, right, on the Nigerian people.
But don't you think, I'm sorry for interrupting, don't you think that our tax to GDP ratio in Nigeria is ridiculously low?
It is low, but improve productivity first, because right now with the hardship the country is going, is not a time to tax people more, because already people are really struggling, right? So how do you add productivity into the economy? And I think, just for example now, right, Nexim Bank still doesn't have a board. This is almost 16 to 17 months into the new administration.
And Nexim Bank is the Nigerian Export and Import
Bank, right? That the management cannot approve a facility of over R1 billion, right? So the companies that need a lot of these facilities, they've done everything. They are waiting for the board to be approved before they can access this facility that will make the economy better. But 16 months down the road, we still don't have a board yet. So it's very hard to, there's simple steps like this, right, will make some part of the economy better. And because even though we live in a federation, but the president has tremendous power. When he outlines a vision with clear direction and channel resources towards those goals, Nigerians will come, because people that criticize and whatever, we all love the country. Nobody wants the country to not do well. So for me, I think lack of direction from the government is one. Appointing a board, something as simple as Nexim board helps. There's a lot of multinationals have been leaving, but it doesn't really tell the clear picture if we're trying to be fair, to the government. When Kimberly Clark, said they are leaving, Wemi Industries, I know a friend that invested, they said they are benefiting from that exit. So because we have local alternatives that are filling those gaps and doing really, really,
So it's not such a bad thing.
There is more to it than just saying a multinational has left. Diageo left, 58% of their shares of Guinness Nigeria, but Tolaram came, and pick it up. Exactly. So there is a bit more nuance, to this, but clear direction from a government. The president said, "I asked for the job, don't pity me." Right. But unfortunately, I think the actions of the government and just these basic steps, like people are struggling. You are seeing people in government buying latest SUVs. Right, so perception matters. Perception matters. There are people that are really working in different sectors that are doing well, that can do better, but they are succeeding in spite of government, not because of government. So clear fiscal policy, right? So, but unfortunately, it seems government is just who you know, and no sense of purpose or direction. But there's a lot of private sector players. Now, okay, just if you look at it, what direction is the government trying to help in the private sector, for example? We have no idea. Literally, we have no idea, right? Buhari, let's say, tried to do, make us rice sufficient food security. Even though we did not achieve that, but at least you could say there was a direction. But for this government, I've asked a few people I know in the government, really, nobody has been able to clearly define what is the government trying to do. And I think if we know, and another simple example that I will give you, right? This tax committee that the president formed.
Yeah, the
yes, the president, yes. They were doing their job. They did not know. All of a sudden, it was announced the cybersecurity levy, right, was announced. So if you have formed a committee to look at all the levies and taxes of the country to come up with a market-driven policy, and then, you just announced cybersecurity levy. So that means their job really is just for show, right? Is not really, because if you wanted to increase a levy you should have, handed it over to them, let them do an advice so that it can be part of a holistic framework, right, or policy. So I think this mixed signals from government doesn't really help anybody.
But the good thing in that case, the so-called levy, I think, was withdrawn.
Yes, exactly. Exactly, was withdrawn.
All right. Yeah. Let's come to Dr. Mbamalu. So in your view, same question, what are the immediate to short-term measures that government ought to adopt going forward that can help us to ameliorate the hardship and begin to take care of this situation? Marcel?
Simple steps. Thank you, Lalu. Simple steps. First, make governance cheap. Reduce the perks of office for government officials, for those appointees. Look at the National Assembly, cut costs of governance. Look at the amount that's spent in running the National Assembly. Show that you are ready. Communicate your readiness, your preparedness as government to cut costs. People read body language more than words, than talk. That's the first step. 2, if I have the privilege, if I am the president today, the first thing I would do, given the present situation that we find ourselves, the first thing I would do would be to remove all taxes, all duties on food items, because insecurity and other things are not helping us to produce enough food in Nigeria today. So what I would do, I would advise those in power to do, is to first remove import duties, any kind of duty on important food items. Very, very important. And I would be doing this together with, simultaneously with cutting down on cost of governance. The other speaker just spoke about private jets, talked about SUVs, talked about the kind of actions and the communications that we've just been grappling with in the last couple of months. I mean, it does not show that we have an emergency in our hands. The hardship is, I don't know how to say it, it's jaw-dropping. The best thing the government would do now is to declare a state of emergency, first on governance, 2 on food. On governance, as I said earlier, is to cut costs of governance. I don't think that those in power today, from the president to the minister, none of them would say they were hungry before they got to where they are today. They don't need those perks. They don't need those monies, if you like. They don't need those millions and billions that are being spent. My advice would be for them to show patriotism, to show commitment, to reducing cost of governance by slashing whatever, if possible, by 70 to 80% of whatever allowances are attached to their offices. The National Assembly will have no business, though it will take some steps to do, more complex steps or complicated steps to do, trying to make our National Assembly unicameral. We don't need a bicameral National Assembly. It's energy and money consuming. All we need to do is to have part-time. In fact, we don't need the Senate. We can do with the lower chamber, the House of Reps, or whatever we want to call it afterwards, but then let them be on part-time. We spend a lot of money on electing those who will get to that place, spend a lot of money in keeping them in office and servicing their lifestyles. That cannot continue if we have this kind of hunger and hardship emergency as a nation. So that's the step first, before you begin to talk of any other thing. Now, again, I would not advise the government to continue on the line with the line they're towing right now, which is tax, tax, tax. Yes, government needs money, but you can imagine the kind of money that government is going to make by cutting down on cost of governance, first and foremost. I heard that a lawmaker, for example, goes home with more than 20 million every month. I think almost more than 20, close to 50 million for some in a month. And I mean, if you cut down on costs and those allowances are reduced to not more than 2 million in a month, I think we will save a lot of money. And then you make food cheap. Food cheap by removing duties on imported food items. And then you help farmers. They need credit facilities. They need, first of all, to address insecurity that will not enable them to go to farm. In the north continues to be the food basket of Nigeria. But with insecurity in the north, how do you expect food to come from there without unnecessary costs? The same for the middle, the other parts of the north. We're talking about the middle belt areas, talking about the Plateau, the Benue axis, and the rest. So I think that, first and foremost, cut down on governance. Secondly, remove cost of importing food items. Then encourage local production of food items by addressing insecurity and tax phenomenon that we have just seen now should not be encouraged. How do I mean? My colleague just talked about increasing the government's plan to increase VAT by as much as 2.5%, from 7.5% to 10%. Oh my God. And then you still, with the hardship we're already facing, you want to create employment. VAT is paid on every item that you have. And companies who make revenues, that they pay VAT. So you know that, of course, the more payments you make outwards, the lesser your propensity to have the capacity to even employ. And you want to get as many youths out of the unemployment market.
What should happen in the oil sector regarding the relationship between NNPC and Dangote? And I want to take you to Fad.
Okay.
What do you think should happen? Very quickly, because of our time is spent.
Before I answer that, I forgot to make one statement.
Okay.
We want to be more productive as a society, but interest rate is too high. We keep increasing interest rate to fight inflation, but inflation keeps going up. So clearly it is not working. So I think we have to look at that as well, because you want people to have cheap capital so that we can be productive as a society. But if interest rate is this high, nobody is going to, borrow any money, which will improve the economy, and which obviously then government can tax, those sectors of the economy. And it's very unfortunate, the back and forth, I think, over the last couple of months between NNPC and
Dangote.
Yes, right? Because from a business point of view, if the richest man in Africa, somebody who has, you don't have to like him as a person, but what he has done for this country is there for all to see.
Right.
And for government, rather than to support what he does so that we can help reduce the forex pressure, right, on our economy, it's very unfortunate to see all this back and forth, and in some instances, unfortunate. Some are even saying government is trying to sabotage it because people are making money from the status quo. But I think what we've seen over the last few weeks has been very positive. I think a lot of discussion is going on, and we hope this will really help so that we depend on our own oil that we refine, we buy locally. So hopefully, and then that resources that we normally pay, we can use it in other sectors of the economy for the betterment of our country.
All right. Thank you so much to our panelists today, Mr. Fahad Aliyu Gaba, and of course, virtually Dr. Masen Mbamalu. Thank you for coming to Inside Sources. And there you have it. That's another edition of Inside Sources today. Like we always say, we are here because we believe that Nigeria will prevail, because we will not relent. Thank you for watching. My name is Laulu Akonde. I'll see you during the next edition.